Hi everyone, my name is Emily Nelson, and this is my virtual rebuttal for POS 465 against Julian Perry, who argues that states should give up their sovereignty to comply with humanitarian international law. While I believe he brought up some good points, I want to offer a counter perspective. States should not give up their sovereignty to comply with humanitarian international law. Sovereignty is a fundamental aspect of a nation's identity, and surrendering it comes with significant risks and consequences, which I will discuss in this presentation. So, my first immediate thought concerns national stability. States giving up their sovereignty creates a loss of control within the state's power and leads to a false sense of security in their identity. One recent example of this happened in 2003, with the United States-led invasion of Iraq. In the U.S., under the George W. Bush administration, the Coalition Provisional Authority, or CPA, was implemented. The president of Iraq at the time, Saddam Hussein, was overthrown as the United States took over Iraq. The CPA, however, quickly turned disastrous because political loyalists were appointed instead of experts, leading to chaos in Iraq and delaying rebuilding their economy and infrastructures. This is just one example of how states, or in this case Iraq, could potentially be destabilized due to disregarding the importance of expertise and national sovereignty within states. This brings up a question. One can also ask, what happens when a nation loses control over its internal governance? A loss of sovereignty can open doors for external actors, in this case in Iraq, the US, to impose their values and policies which might not align with cultural, economic, or political realities of the state. Returning to the Iraq example, the Coalition Provisional Authority not only disrupted Iraq's infrastructure, but also dismissed experienced Iraqi officials. This caused widespread unemployment and angered local politicians, further destabilizing the region. The question remains, would this situation have been different if Iraq retained more sovereignty? Possibly. We may never know. However, these actions highlight the dangers of external control undermining a state's ability to self-govern. Following that, throughout history, there has been inconsistent enforcement of international humanitarian law, which further questions its legitimacy and the so-called principles of impartiality it claims to have. One example that is actually happening right now is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which shows how powerful nations, in this case the United States, can shield allies like Israel from consequences by using their influences in the United Nations Security Council. Meanwhile, weaker and smaller nations face severe penalties for similar actions. One example of this is the UN imposing strict sanctions to Iraq after the invasion of Kuwait in the 90s. This conflict demonstrates how political influence frequently shapes the application of international humanitarian law, rather than the principles of humanitarianism guiding its enforcement, which again further questions the legitimacy of international humanitarian law. Now, international humanitarian law is important because it helps protect civilians, ensures human rights, and holds violators accountable. However, it is important to note that states do not need to give up sovereignty to support these principles. Rather, they can engage in humanitarian efforts selectively, such as signing international human rights agreements or cooperating on peace initiatives, while still maintaining control over their internal matters. This way, states can uphold their sovereignty while contributing to a more global and fair system. So, I have a proposal, a balance between the two. Because how can states still have freedom, but comply with important international humanitarian laws? Because the fact is, humanitarian international laws are essential. They exist for a reason. While humanitarian laws are incredibly important and can provide good for citizens and nations, it would be foolish not to see past the flaws they exhibit throughout history and the unfair advantages they can sometimes claim. States giving up their sovereignty is not realistic nor constitutional to uphold. Instead, states should strive to balance upholding their sovereignty and engaging in compliance with international humanitarian laws. How would this work? Instead of giving up complete control, as seen as in the 2003 Iraq invasion, states can adopt specific measures that align with their nation's national interest, whether it be political, economic, or strategic, while also actively performing in reforms to ensure greater fairness and impartiality in international humanitarian laws. However, reform is also critical. To make international humanitarian laws more effective, we must address their consistency and ensure that powerful nations are held to the same standards as weaker ones. This would foster trust, fairness, and genuine international cooperation. To close, the real question is this: wouldn't a system that respects both sovereignty and humanitarian principles create a stronger, more just global community? By balancing national interests with global responses, states can provide their sovereignty while playing a crucial role in shaping a fair international system. Thank you.